Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I love when you choose to spend your incredibly valuable time here with us. And because of that, I really strive to always give some great content. And today is a subject I'm really interested in. Certainly, when I want my kids to listen to this episode, and definitely going to share the book. We're going to be talking today with Dr. Emilio Justo about the power of pause as the key to enhanced negotiation. So, welcome, Emilio. It's so great to have you here.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much, Cindy. I greatly appreciate the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, and I love this topic for today. And before we jump in, for our listeners, if you don't know him, Dr. Justo is a two-time international TEDx speaker. His first talk was on delayed gratification. It became the third most watched global TEDx talk last year with over 6 million views. And as someone who has my own TEDx talk, I got to tell you, that's impressive. I did a whoopee dance when I hit 2 million. He has tripled that. And I definitely, when I heard about this delayed gratification, I wanted to share the concept with you because it really resonated with me. So, Emilio, you immigrated to the US as a child to escape Fidel Castro's oppressive regime, and some would say against all odds became a medical doctor at only 23 years old, which is mind blowing. And I wonder, how did you experience impact on your success, I guess, that experience of having to immigrate?
Well, it's an interesting question because I get that a lot. And when it's your own experience, you don't really think much of it because it's your own life. You don't know
Yeah.
what a different life is. So from an outsider's perspective, it perhaps seems maybe a little unique. For me, it was my own life. And I grew up in a very loving, nurturing family. I was and I am an only child, so that gave me a lot of love from my parents. But certainly, as I talk about in the book, delayed gratification, my journey in life has been one of delayed gratification, and not necessarily by design, but it was basically what my life ended up being. And so again, I didn't
Yeah.
know any different. And as I became an adult and I started contemplating these things, it occurred to me that, hey, I really have lived a life of delayed gratification.
Yeah, I love that. And that really resonates with me when you say about, hey, it was just my life. But, we're not aware when we're in it because, I grew up in a low rental apartment in what was considered a really tough neighborhood. But for me, I never thought of that. It was just home until I ended up going to middle school where people lived in, wow, houses. What a novel concept. And then I saw that disparity and I was like, oh, okay, this is different. As I was reading your book, it really struck me, this idea, because I've never thought of the immigration experience. I mean, I've always admired the sacrifice of parents, making those huge commitment to have a better life for their kids, but I'd never quite framed it as delayed gratification. And as I was reading it, it totally resonated with me. But before we dig into your delayed gratification model, I'd love if we could talk about mindset for a minute, maybe. I'm a big sucker for that. I often say mindset is our first and most important negotiation, negotiating with ourselves. So I'm wondering if you have some tips on how we can negotiate our mindset to maximize our opportunities for success, including, wrapping our head around this delayed gratification concept in a world where everything seems to be pushing us in the other direction.
Right. Well, the mindset, I think you're absolutely spot on, Cindy. It's a challenge, having three teenage kids myself, trying to instill this in them is
Yeah.
very challenging. And especially in today's society, when you and I were growing up, we didn't have all these technologies. We didn't have the allure of the immediate gratification and the same
Yeah.
day delivery from Amazon or
Yeah.
DoorDash, et cetera. So,
Yeah.
so having that mindset that, hey, if you resist that immediate temptation for gratification, and if you look towards the future for a much greater satisfaction and a much greater reward, that ultimately it will come and it will come multiple fold.
Yeah.
But understanding that for a youth, for a young person, is very, very challenging. I've got to say, it's easy to talk about it in a book. It's another thing to teach it as a
Yeah.
parent.
Yeah. Because all of the pressure is the opposite, right? I mean, it seems, and I thought you really nailed it in your book when you talked as well about this desire for instant success. And even our generation, like, I look at my parents who, when they first started out on their own, they were young, right? I mean, my mom had me at 16 and she's mortified when I've shared that through history, but they took orange crates for furniture and it never crossed their mind to expect all of the perks and everything instantaneously, where I think, and when you think of it with our generation, I'm really dating myself. Even when you talk about delayed, something as simple as the rotary phone, you had to wait for it to go, you know, I mean, nothing was instant. So let's talk about that digital age for a second. You know, with everyone looking for that instant gratification, what are some of the benefits of adopting delayed gratification as the new norm?
Well, I think that again, if we can resist that temptation for that immediate short-term reward, which may seem quite powerful in the short term,
Yeah,
but if we can look ahead and work hard and put our mind to a greater thing, a greater thing to achieve, that ultimate reward will be so much larger,
yeah,
and furthermore, will really appreciate it so much more. For example, I try to teach our kids that if you work for something, rather than looking for a handout from me to get
yeah,
that instant gratification, if you can work towards something and then achieve it, and it may
yeah,
take some time. I mean, you may not get it today, you may
yeah,
not get it next week, it could be in a year, it could be in 5 years, but once you do achieve it, boy, it has so much more value, and the person will appreciate it so much more than just having a handout or
yeah,
having something come to fruition right away.
yeah. And you're right. I think it does, it exponentially grows when you're willing to do the wait rather than wanting something quick and dirty and getting it now where you'll maybe get, you know, this level of success. If you lay the proper foundation and all of the groundwork, you're going to exponentially increase that ultimate success. And one of the things that really struck me in your book was this idea about it being in our DNA. I had never thought of it that way before, that, you know, if we look at our ancestors back to the caveman days, everything was delayed gratification, right? Whether it was the hunt or for crops or something as basic as shelter. I thought that was a really interesting perspective. So,
Yes, I mean that's the way as human beings we have been wired from a DNA perspective from the caveman era.
yeah,
It's only in the very very recent modern era that we've been able to have this incredible instant gratification. That sure it has its benefits. I'm not saying that all instant gratification is bad, but I think as far as maturing as an individual, as a human being, and looking for those greater rewards that really have substance. I mean, okay,
yeah,
it's okay to order a meal from, get it delivered from DoorDash. I'm not saying that's bad,
yeah,
but I think ultimately, the big things in life, the things that really have purpose and meaning in our lives, if we can really kind of put the brakes and strive and work hard and have the patience, create that patience, that resilience to step forward, it just means so much more.
yeah.
I just feel so strongly about that.
Yeah. Well, and it was a great perspective shift, I thought as well, right? This idea that this current instant gratification model, that's actually unnatural. What's natural to us as a human species is actually the delayed gratification. And for our listeners, just think even of your intimate partner, you know, we don't go out typically and just grab the first person we see and go, okay, you'll do. We wait and we find somebody who's the more compatible, who meets all of our needs. So definitely there's something to this. And I guess if we sort of switch gears a bit, I'd love if you could talk to us about how delayed gratification helps us get better negotiated outcomes in our life as well.
Oh, absolutely. So in my mind, I kind of break it down into five subject matters in terms of negotiation. And it's funny. Well, it's funny to me and to my family because my wife and kids know that whenever there's an opportunity for a negotiation, like something as simple as going to buy a car,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the first one in. I mean, I love negotiation. I mean, I don't know why,
Yeah.
but basically, I break it down into kind of five different categories. So one is strategic patience, right? So
Yes.
when you learn, and when delayed gratification teaches you that art of patience, it allows you to kind of hold out for better offers, let's say, rather than just
Yes.
settling so quickly for less favorable terms. So that requires what I call strategic patience,
I like that.
which can be difficult to have because some people want to just steamroll through. Like one of our sons, I won't name which one, but when he's kind of negotiating, he hasn't learned that. And so he wants to just almost like
Yeah.
bully his way through to
Yeah.
what he wants. And I tell him that that's just not the way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting as you say that, and I can't wait to hear all 5, but as you're saying that, it really struck me too, that it allows the space when you're strategically patient. Not only does it allow you to be able to build a relationship and all those other build trust, things that are going to get better, but it leaves the space for creative out because sometimes we think we know what we want. And so many people go into negotiations so tunnel vision about just, as you say, what winning or bullying your way to get that thing when actually there might be a much better outcome if you opened up to listen to the other party. So I love that strategic patience. I think it has benefits in so many ways. What's number 2?
So number two, I would call it long-term gains. And what I mean by that is when you prioritize long-term benefits over the immediate rewards, you can then negotiate deals that provide greater value over time, which basically ensure sustainable success.
Yeah.
So looking at those long-term gains, I think are important. Number three for me would be enhanced credibility.
And hold on
So
one sec, just before you do, rather than
sure.
coming back, if you don't mind, just and for our listeners as well, because I think that's a really important point, and I want to really put a pin in that for our listeners as well. That long-term gain that applies whether you're in sales, as an entrepreneur, sometimes trying to get that best buck in that quick sale, that short term sort of gain. I want that money now. You might be better to take a way lower deal, maybe even below cost, to secure a much bigger long term gain that's going to exponentially increase the reward. So I think that's a really valuable point there. So sorry, 3 you were saying.
Yeah, no. That's you summarized it beautifully. I mean, that was a great example. Number three would be, in my view, enhanced credibility. And what I mean by that is that showing the ability to wait demonstrates on your part self-control and foresight.
Yeah,
Traits that can increase your credibility and trustworthiness in the eyes of a negotiating partner.
yeah,
So I think that credibility is important. You have to have that self-control.
absolutely. Yeah, and
Uh,
on that, I mean, we somewhere along the line we started defining success, and this is a rant of mine often, whether in business, in our legal system, in politics, we define success as getting, just pushing to get the job done. The person who, talks the loudest and longest is the person who's going to be the most successful. When really we lost our way, it is all about relationship. Getting those better outcomes is all about relationship and building that trust and building that rapport and leaving the space to get those better outcomes. So I'm loving this model.
yeah. So number four would be, in my view, stress reduction. So delayed gratification, helps reduce the impulse to make hasty decisions under pressure, leading kind of to a more calculated and less stressful negotiation process.
Smart. Love it.
And then finally, fifth is what I call leverage building. So the ability to delay gratification allows you to build leverage by not appearing to be desperate, right? That's what happens when we're too anxious. And so by doing this and building this leverage, this can shift the power dynamic
Yeah.
in your favor. So which can lead to a much more favorable negotiation outcome.
Yeah. This should be your next book, Emilio, frankly. I love this. I knew this, I was excited about the idea about talking to you because I could see some of the implications for negotiation, but you have laid it out in a much more structured way that makes perfect sense. I mean, I think about all the models I advocate, and a lot of them are tied to this idea actually about delayed gratification in many ways. So I think that's fabulous. Now, I think one of the first times well, I wouldn't say heard about, but really became more aware about delayed gratification as an indicator of success was when I heard, I think it was Stanford. I think they've done various versions of the experiment. So I'd love if you probably know more about it than I do, so I don't botch it. Can you tell us a little bit about that experiment and what they found?
Yeah, it's a great experiment. So in the early 1970s, a psychologist by the name of Walter Mischel conducted the truly original Stanford marshmallow experiment. And so they took, I believe it was about 600 children ages 4 through 6. And they basically gave them a very simple choice. They gave them a marshmallow. Here's a marshmallow. You can either eat it now, or if you wait approximately 15 minutes, you'll get 2 marshmallows, right? And they tracked these children amazingly longitudinally for years. I mean, for
Yeah.
many, many years throughout their lifetime. And what they consistently found was that those children who were able to delay gratification during that experiment had much, much higher levels of achieving success in so many different ways. Not only academically, they had higher SAT scores
Yeah.
overall, they achieved higher academic performance, they achieved much better relationships, much better emotional intelligence. I mean, you name it, right
Yeah.
down the list of things. It was just amazing how it was such an incredible predictor of overall success and happiness in one's life.
That was the thing that I found so impressive about that study. It was the longevity that really had the impact, because there was no denying. And like you said, it was unexpected things like those better relationships and in areas that you wouldn't have expected. But really, it makes sense, when we're always looking for the shortcut, when we're always looking for the quickie, in every area of our life, we end up with less, right? Less fulfillment, less possibility, right across the board. I think that's just, yeah. And I can think of, and I'm sure you can as well. And for our listeners, I encourage you, think about people in your life who would have gone for the marshmallow right away versus people who would have had that stamina to be able to wait, that longer term vision that, well, why wouldn't I double my input here just by waiting a few minutes? And I bet you'll find in your life too, the ones who go for the instant gratification are probably people who struggle more in life, who are living paycheck to paycheck, who are looking to win the lottery rather than put in the groundwork. So I think it's beautiful. And I wonder, it strikes me today, especially, we're seeing such increased polarization and division, politically and beyond that. What you were just saying about the Stanford study, it strikes me, can delayed gratification help us negotiate beyond sort of political chaos, for want of a better term, as well?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to keep that in mind. And in terms of the whole political arena and political chaos, it's very challenging. I mean, I think
Yeah.
delayed gratification should be part of that formula, but some things are so urgent that I don't know. I mean, I almost feel like certain things you can't really use the delayed gratification because you really need to achieve something sooner rather than later. But I feel, going back to the whole negotiation process in general, and I suspect you feel the same way, that when you're doing negotiation, I think you also need to be willing to step back and walk away from the table, at
Yeah.
least for a period of time, and then be willing to go back. I mean, the
Yeah.
last thing you want to do in any negotiation is have this incredible sense of urgency where you make incorrect decisions,
Yeah.
whereby you may think it may benefit you right now, but in the long run, if you really look at it from a delayed perspective, if you look at that delayed gratification in the long run, it may end up biting you in the butt. So you
Yeah.
got to willing to step back, step away from the table, reconvene, start from scratch if need be.
Yeah.
But I fully agree with you that building the rapport and the relationship is critical, because if you don't have that to start with, if it's two contentious negotiators who really are upset with each other and raising their voices or something of that matter,
Yeah.
you're never going to get anything achieved of true long-term value. So you got to
Yeah.
have the rapport, the relationship, but you also have to be willing to take a step back and say, hold it, I
Yeah.
think we need to rethink things, because this is not going in the right direction.
I think that's great advice, and really across all spheres of negotiation, from our personal to our professional and even on the global scene. And just to keep it easy for the listeners, think about in your relationships, whether with your intimate partner, your kids, or a friendship circle, how often in your life have you been in the heat of a potentially difficult conversation and negotiation and ended up saying things that you just wish you could take back? And had you taken that pause, that power of the pause, had you taken a step away from the proverbial table, you would have been able to come back with a refreshed perspective and gotten much better outcomes for everybody. I think that's really valuable. And
Yeah,
it's
I
funny,
agree.
just going back to politics, it strikes me as well that I think a lot of the problems we find in the world today are from because everybody is expecting instant gratification, politicians, rather than taking the long view, the helpful view, but build the infrastructure, even at the municipal level or at the statewide level or whatever, rather than building, it's like, I want a fast result now. Let me give them the tax break or the tax, refund right now, rather than actually taking that leadership role to make sure that we've got the long-term things in place that we need. And it's just become I think it's created a chaos of its own, if you will. So,
Yes, no, I totally get it. And going back, if I may, just a real quick
yeah.
side note to the marshmallow experiment. So it's interesting. Just literally 2 weeks ago, in clinic here, one of my patients that I was seeing had heard that I had done that TEDx talk on delayed
Yeah.
gratification, and he actually talked to me a little bit about it because he was one of the kids in the
No
study.
way. Oh
Yes, I
my
couldn't
gosh.
believe it. So we talked about it, and he said that he was one of the ones who actually waited for the second marshmallow, and I can't remember exactly what he ended up doing in his career, but
Yeah.
he ended up being very successful, and he thought it was a really a brilliant study. I mean, he really had very positive things to say about it.
What are the chances of that though? That
Yeah, I know.
you've
It's
written a
like two
book
weeks
about
ago.
delayed gratification where you talk about that study and then you end up coming across
Yeah,
them in your practice. I love that.
yeah,
Now, one of the other areas where I suspect our thoughts are very similar, like I'm a big believer in, failabrations, right? That we celebrate our failures as learning opportunities for, enhanced growth. Let's see where we fell down, where we failed, pick it up, take a look and see what we can learn. I would love your views on embracing failure.
yeah. I'm a huge believer, and in my book, I talk about this extensively. I give my own personal examples of which I'm embarrassed to admit those examples, but I talk about them freely because the reality of it is that I'm a human being like anyone else, and I'm prone to failures even to this day. But I keep learning from them,
Yeah,
and so when I'm dealt a failure or something that one might consider a lemon, then as my wife consistently points out to me, that now it's up to me to make lemonade out of it.
yeah,
So yes, you have to embrace those failures. And so when one has setbacks, we have to change the paradigm and look at it as purely temporary steps back. So
yeah,
setbacks are temporary steps back, and then we need to bounce forward in terms of progressing, and that progression, which, not to get on a tangent in my second TEDx talk, but
yeah,
my second TEDx talk is all about changing the paradigm of obsession to a
yeah,
positive connotation rather than an unhealthy fixation. It is rather focusing on a specific goal and target and doing everything you can to achieve it. And so when you have a setback, look at it as purely a temporary step back and then
yeah.
move forward. And in order to progression, in my view, requires obsession. They go hand in hand. You have to be
Very cool.
obsessed with the end goal in mind to move forward and to bounce forward after that failure. And failure is okay. We learn by our mistakes.
Yeah.
So we have to embrace it. We have to say, hey, okay, I messed up or things didn't go as well as I had hoped that they would. And that's okay. I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to shift my thinking, my model, and now we're going to attack it in a different manner.
Yeah, that's a great. You have some really interesting perspective shifts, and I think that was a great way of framing it. And I see it as really totally aligned with this delayed gratification concept, right? Because when you want instant gratification, you try something, it doesn't work, you get upset, you see it as a failure, and you quit, and you don't move forward, as opposed to being willing to sit back and reflect on it and learn from it and grow from it and then apply. Or alternatively, other people, if they don't quit with that instant gratification it's like, okay, this I'm going to just forge through without taking the time to get the learning. So I see it as totally consistent with your theory about the power of the delayed gratification, or the power of the pause. We keep talking about your book. I don't think I've even named it yet. So for our listeners out there, the book is called The Power of Pause. And since we're talking about your book again, I'd love if you could share what is one of the most surprising things that you discovered, either while researching or writing the book? Anything really surprise or shock you?
This is my first book that I've written, so this was kind of a new venture for me at this later stage in my life.
Yeah.
So two things. And number one, I learned that on the one hand, it's extremely enjoyable to write a book, but yet on the other hand, it's extremely time intensive. And,
Yeah.
and when one, when one has a full-time job as I do,
Yeah.
50 hours a week doing surgery and seeing clinic patients, it had its own challenges, but I pushed through, devoting every weekend I could to it, and even time when my family was having our last Christmas vacation, I devoted a lot of time to it. So what was surprising to me is really the journey of writing the book is one that I feel that I can celebrate, having gone through the trials and tribulations and the challenges and the frustrations of going through those steps, which
Yeah.
is challenging, but the reward is just tastes so good. I mean,
Yeah.
just on a personal level, right?
Yeah.
It's not the rewards from a financial standpoint or anything like that. It's just it was the time in my life when I wanted to write something that I could leave behind for my children and
Yeah.
for maybe future grandchildren, for the generations beyond me when I'm no longer on this earth. And that's
Yeah.
kind of part of my motivation. And the other part, frankly, was just basically getting this message across for my kids.
Yeah.
Uh, because I've lived this, and my wife and I have struggled with this and teaching these concepts to our children. I mean, I'd love to tell you that we've raised these perfect kids because we were perfect parents, and we're not. We've
Yeah.
made plenty of mistakes as parents, but we're trying to learn from them and trying to teach these lessons for future generations.
Yeah, such a great approach. And I love how you captured that about writing the book because it's so true. And it is so in some ways the ultimate expression of delayed gratification, right? That legacy piece of it, especially a
Right.
book like this where it's, mission driven. I hate that word gets so overused these days that unfortunately I'm almost reluctant to use it, but I really think there's an incredible power in putting something, taking the time to put in the effort and massage it and work it and give examples to make sure that your book is going to resonate in a way that it'll pick up and it'll have some longevity. I think it's such a beautiful expression of delayed gratification, and there's a generosity in it too. So I love
And
that.
part of that legacy piece also, Cindy, is, for example, that book is also an audiobook on Audible, and I chose to narrate it myself,
Yeah.
which was an incredible process unto itself. I mean, that
Yeah.
that process I loved. I mean, I could be a professional narrator. I loved it so much.
Oh,
But
nice.
but the point being that whether our kids actually go back and listen to that, I don't know, but it will be there when I'm long gone. My
Yeah.
voice will be there teaching them, and perhaps if someday they have children, my grandchildren, great grandchildren, there will always be something where they can listen to me giving
Oh,
these lessons
yeah.
for an eternity, right?
Yeah.
And so that was part of the reason that I really wanted to narrate this myself and not just turn it over to some
Yeah.
professional narrator.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. I love that. And I hadn't thought of that myself because I'm in the process now actually of doing the audio for my book, and I hadn't thought about that legacy piece of having my voice out there for my kids and down the road, generations of whoever is going to come after us. I think that's a beautiful approach to it. So I love that. Now, what is one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've had in your life? It doesn't not about this topic at all. I normally like to end by asking what's one of your greatest mindset, like something that happened where you had an aha moment that helped you sort of shift to show up differently or think about something differently.
I think I'm sure there are many of them if I sit and ponder, but the one that immediately comes to mind is, and I talk about it in the book, is one of my big errors in my life on a personal level, is that back 20 years ago when we were having the big real estate boom, when
Yeah.
homes were selling at all-time highs, and when it was very, very easy, the mortgage and banking industry was completely almost unregulated, and you can get a mortgage with almost a little to nothing down. And I got into this mindset by going to a seminar that, oh, I'm going to become a real estate tycoon, right? And so I start in the course of 1 year, no exaggeration, I purchased 20 $500,000 single
Oh
family.
my gosh. Wow.
And can you imagine how stupid that was? And my wife, my wife was telling me, she thought this was a bad idea from the beginning,
Yeah.
but she let me do my thing. She thought, oh, okay, this is his new passion. Let him do it.
Yeah.
And very quickly I learned how foolish I was, because clearly buying these homes with very little money down meant that even if I put tenants in there,
Yeah.
their rent was not enough to
Yeah.
cover the mortgage. And I quickly had to start unloading these properties because it was not something that I could sustain.
Yeah.
So it really, on the one hand, humbled me because how silly and what a terrible mistake I made, and that I wasn't the all-knowing one, my wife was. Uh, but also it also gave me resilience with the support of my wife. She was really
Yeah.
there backing me. She never rubbed my face in it,
Yeah.
but it gave me that resilience, as I talk about, to just look at it as a temporary setback, and I pushed forward. And within a reasonable period of time, over a few years, I got out of that mess, and then I just plowed straight ahead, and things have just skyrocketed since,
Yeah.
but not in the real estate world.
Yeah.
I shied away from that after that. So
I love
so that's been my one learning thing in my life, that I'm very embarrassed about, and but at the same time I publicly disclose it, because I'd like people to understand that we all make bad decisions, and
Yeah.
some worse than others. I think this was
Yeah.
a pretty naive and bad decision on my part, but it was the one time in my life when I tried, and I abandoned my core principle of
Yeah.
delayed gratification, and I wanted to go the instant gratification route,
Yeah.
and I got burned.
Yeah.
So since then, I went back to the whole delayed gratification, and really life has been an incredible blessing ever since. So I'm just so grateful to God and to my family for the
Yeah.
support that I've received.
And what a great example. And I think it's brilliant that you share it. I think a lot of people wouldn't be willing to share, so many people out there, especially that, the Instagram success, the perfect life, everything perfect decisions. And nobody's sharing any of these hardships that help other people recognize, you're not alone. You're not alone. And I must say, Emilio, it was one of the things I particularly loved about your book. There's such a grace and a humbleness there that I think it makes your message even more powerful, and people are going to be much more open to receiving it, which I am excited about. So,
Thank you
um,
for the kind words. I appreciate that, Cindy.
yeah. And coming back when you were talking about the book, I normally end with the mindset thing, but it just struck me as we're chatting here as well that, like, even today with AI, oh my gosh, everybody and their brother are out there wanting to write a book in a day. There are all these programs out there, write your book in a day. Basically, it's AI writing the book for you. And I want to encourage our listeners as well. There's incredible power in, like, try writing, but find a subject that you're passionate about and put the time in, because not only the delayed gratification we already talked about, but it really helps you set priorities in life. And it struck me when you were saying, Emilio, about having to, balancing a bit the job and the family and the this. I know a lot of writers who end up getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, or it's about blocking out that time, but putting your heart into it. There's going to be a lot more value in that book ultimately. Things like, AI is not going to share the kind of stories that Emilio shared with us here today, right? That are going to give you that real resonance. So, Emilio, this has been great. I love this conversation. Would love to have you back sometime to chat some more, maybe about your second TEDx talk. Because
Yeah.
I hadn't thought the obsession thing fit, but as you described it here, I'm like, that's an interesting angle as well. I really like that. So, thank
Yeah,
you for
yeah,
joining and sharing.
I appreciate the opportunity. It's really wonderful getting to know you. You've asked some brilliant questions, and I'd be most honored if you'd ever have me back. I'd be happy to talk about. It's called Unleashing the Drive Within: The Obsession Advantage to Unprecedented Success, and I delivered it earlier in 2024, and it's been out on YouTube for about 10 weeks. It has about 1.5 million views thus far, and it's again one of my passions. And hopefully in 2025, I'll find a little time to do a third TEDx talk. But that subject
Nice.
is still in the works, so I'm not going to disclose quite yet.
Okay, well, keep me posted. And I must say, having a 30-year career as a social justice attorney, like both of your TEDx talks so far, I think are so applicable, right? And for the lawyers in the audience listening, it's our clients often come wanting instant gratification, wanting those immediate results. And I think this is a great lesson for everyone out there as well, to not only for yourself, but where you're in a position where you're advising your clients and in business, to be able to think more strategically, to look to get those better outcomes. So I love that, and I have no doubt they'll be interested in the obsession. A lot of us are very obsessed in unhealthy ways. It'll be great to hear about how we can channel that kind of characteristic into more perhaps beneficial avenues. So, where can people learn more about you, Emilio?
Well, I have a personal website outside of my medical practice. I have a personal website, and that website is dremiliojusto.com, and that's spelled doctor as a DR. Emilio, Emiliojusto is my last name. So dremiliojusto.com. And through the website, they can follow my journey. I mean, I have a tremendous amount of information on there. I have my TEDx talks are linked there, as well as a bunch of news articles, podcasts, etc. And if they go to the contact page there, they can fill out their name and information, and they can send me an email directly. And I respond to all the emails that come in myself. I don't dish it out to a third party, and I'm very responsive to emails.
I love that. That's fantastic. And for our listeners, if you didn't catch that or you're on the road, don't worry. We got your back. We'll make sure to have them in the show notes as well. So do check it out. Make sure to check out the book as well. It's an easy read. It's a quick read, but it's certainly not superficial. It can be a real game change for you again. So that's The Power of Pause. And we'll make sure to put that in the show notes as well. And I have no doubt, I know I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I am sure you have as well. I think it's an important issue, and we rarely talk about it. So make sure to subscribe if you haven't done that, but also give the gift of sharing. Share this episode with other people in your life. Frankly, if you've got those teenage kids or beyond, start that messaging early. Other people in your circle as well, share this episode so they can start applying these principles to negotiate their best lives. And before we sign off today, I'd like to talk about a few ways that we can work together. I specialize in teaching both seasoned and early stage attorneys a better way to practice, so that you can be increasingly authentic, a little less battle worn, and ultimately significantly more effective. And I'd certainly love the opportunity to help either you or your firm be able to thrive and stand out. If you are interested in bringing a better way to practice law to yourself or your firm, check it out at practicingwithpurpose.org. You can book a consultation or just reach out to me. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and find ways that you can practice on purpose. Find a better way to practice law so you can rekindle your passion and make a difference in the world, negotiating your best life on your terms. Until next time, take care.